My name is Partybug, and I would like to engage with you in an imaginative exercise. Let's suppose, and this is weird, I know, that you know of the obscure, never-before Let's Played game, Dark Souls. And let's say that you are a fan of these Dark Souls. So then what would you say if I told you that you could have more Dark Souls? That you could have a theoretically infinite amount of the Dark Souls? You'd probably say, yeah, that sounds pretty good, give me some of that. And they did! They did it, those madmen! And it's called Necropolis. So I have some words to say about Necropolis, but I should probably explain how it works first. So when you start a new game, you are given a choice between the Brute and the Blackguard. The Brute is slow and strong, the Blackguard is fast and a little bit weaker. But that's who we're going to be playing as. So right away you'll notice some familiar things. At the bottom left we've got a health bar and a stamina gauge. We've got a camera very reminiscent of Dark Souls, and a control scheme that is also reminiscent. And I hope you like it, because it can't be changed. So let's take a quick look around the starting area here. Over here we got Brazen Head. He may or may not be a member of the Illuminati. We've got a merchant, who is useless to us right now because we don't have any money. And the library, where we can check out codexes. Codexes are a pretty important part of this game. They're the only thing that persists between runs. You can purchase them using tokens you earn. And I'm going to be using this one, Carpe Per Diem, because it's the best one. It gives you basically double the gems you pick up. And gems are very important. So when we set off, we are also given some tasks to complete. We can do those to earn more tokens. And knowing that, let's head off to Necropolis. These are Hordemen, one of the basic enemies of the game. So Necropolis works quite a bit like Dark Souls. You've got a dash, a light attack, a heavy attack. You have a jump attack. You can actually jump in this game. And you also have a charge attack. Enemies, when they die, will drop gems. They will occasionally drop other things like their weapons or rations. None of their weapons are very good, so I'm just gonna stick with what I start with. Also, I will share a pro Necropolis tip right off the bat. If you want to win every fight, just attack and then dash backward, and you're golden. You will be a god. This guy's dropping a lot of food. So you probably noticed after a few fights my stamina gauge has lowered slightly. Oh, these guys are like the Titanite demons in Dark Souls. They run around, and if you kill them you get good stuff. Especially the red ones. If you see a red one, kill it as soon as possible, because they can drop weapons. And they can also drop potions and scrolls. They're pretty great. So, as you've noticed, my stamina gauge has slowly depleted, which is one of the core mechanics of Necropolis. As you fight and block and use jump attacks or power attacks, your stamina gauge decreases. And to increase it, again, to its full length, you will need to eat food. Or drink potions that can recover it. And I've picked up quite a bit of food. Let's try this rotten food first. That worked well enough. We'll save the rest for later. These guys here are Clockwork Knights. We can follow the same pattern to kill them as everything else. And their weapons are actually something I'm going to pick up, because they have the electricity element. A lot of weapons in this game have different elements, and all enemies are weak to a certain element. Probably nothing on this floor works with electricity, but it'll be good to have for later. So now that we've gotten a taste of what Necropolis has to offer, I want to talk about Necropolis as a game. So the first time I played Necropolis was probably a year ago, just after its big update came out that was supposed to make the game better, put in the new class, do a bunch of different stuff. And when I first played it, I was repulsed by it. I disliked it very much. I couldn't tell you exactly why then, but it was just wrong. And I played it for like 30 minutes and then set it aside. So you can imagine the joy in my heart when I decided that this would be the next video for the LP. I thought, at last, now I'll show those fucking clown shoes and harebrained schemes what for. I was gonna go hog wild. I was gonna make them lose a day they released this piece of garbage. But then I also made a decision that I was gonna try and spend some time with the game before I showed it off, so I could look like I knew what I was talking about. It's weird, I know. So for the past week, I've been playing Necropolis, and I've learned how it works. I've even beaten it once. And, you know, I've come to certain conclusions. None of the conclusions are that it's a good game. However, it is a playable game. It might even be an okay game. But mostly I've figured out why Necropolis doesn't work. And it's because it's not Dark Souls. And I know it's weird to criticize a game for not being another game, but Necropolis is supposed to be a roguelike Dark Souls. That's what it was meant to be. That's what everyone expected it to be. That's what you get when you look at a screenshot and you say, oh, this is roguelike Dark Souls. That's pretty cool. And I suppose it got close, but the problem is the source material is just too good. Dark Souls is real good, y'all. Like, all of them. Even the second one. Yeah. And when you make a Souls-like, you're basically inviting comparison to, you know, the original. And it's hard to meet those expectations. One example off the top of my head is that Dark Souls has amazing level design, and it's hard for a roguelite, which has procedural level design, to compare to that. We saw this in Bloodborne, and, well, Necropolis has a striking art style that's pretty good, and more varied areas than boring gray chalice nonsense. It still lacks actual interesting design. And yeah, I'm saying procedural generation isn't as good as handmade stuff. I know I'm doing fucking rocket science over here, but it really comes back to the whole Dark Souls is a good game thing. But my second and really most realist of grievances against Necropolis is that the combat, the meat and potatoes of the game, falls short as well. And I think the problem is mostly that it doesn't feel as visceral as Dark Souls. Like, when I hit a dude in Dark Souls, I feel it in my heart. I get a cool sound, I get some blood splatter, maybe I flat him like a pancake or get staggered. It feels good, man. When I kill someone in Dark Souls, I get also like a whooshy sound and some souls, and the shit is real dead. I know that he's real dead. Real dead. But killing stuff in Necropolis just doesn't feel as good. Sure, some weapons will stagger and knock down enemies, and stuff glows red when it gets hit, but it feels all really floaty and lacking in conviction. no sense of satisfaction. There's just no viscosity to it. Oh, this guy's a problem. This guy is a street shark. They're actually called gem eaters, but we all know they're street sharks. They do a lot of damage if they hit you, so I'm gonna try to avoid that. But as I was saying, this game lacks the viscerality, and I know that's not a word, of Dark Souls combat. I mean, sure, sometimes when I hit something it gets staggered, and it flashes red a little, but it just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel good to hit stuff. It doesn't feel good to kill stuff. That's my main issue. Another problem with the combat is that it's too easy. I feel like there's not enough nuance to it. As I mentioned before, the way to win is you attack and then dash back, and that'll carry you through pretty much every encounter in the game, with the exception of 1 or 2 enemies. And I know you're saying, well, in Dark Souls all you have to do is roll past attacks and then you win. Well, yeah, that's true. The problem is that Necropolis doesn't have quite as many enemy variations as Dark Souls, and most importantly, Dark Souls has bosses, which exist to test your skill and force you to learn new patterns, and do all sorts of cool stuff like that. Whereas Necropolis has no bosses. Actually, that's not exactly true. Necropolis does have one boss, but it can be dealt with in much the same way every other enemy can be dealt with, and it only appears on the very last floor at the end. So I think the lack of challenging enemies and more nuanced combat is definitely against Necropolis. Definitely not in its favor. There's also sort of a lack of weapon variety. All weapons behave more or less the same. I mean, there are a few different categories, but the options you have aren't quite as numerous as they are in the Dark Souls. And those are my main issues with the game. The viscerality is really the key one. There is, however, one amazing thing that I wish Dark Souls had that this game has. And it's the fact that enemies can do friendly fire damage to one another. That is the best thing about this game. We reached the door to the second area. It costs 200 gems to get in here, which you will almost always have enough for. I can't imagine a situation when you wouldn't. And we gain the ability to level up. You can spend gems to level up. The first one costs 500. Next one costs 1500, so we don't have quite enough. But that's why gems are super important, and it's good to have even more than you usually would. We could also change our codex if we wanted, but there's no need for that. And there should be a merchant around here somewhere. He might be on the upper floor. Or not. Apparently he's just not around. So let's go down. One thing different about Necropolis than Dark Souls, it has a crafting system. You start with the ability to craft 2 kinds of food, and also 1 random kind of potion. We actually got the best potion, so that's pretty good. But it's always a good idea to have at least 3 rations on hand. And a potion of vigor if you can get one. I was hoping to buy it from the merchant, but couldn't find him, so we're just gonna roll. So this is the second level. Still shouldn't be too hard. Got some spiders. Spiders should be weak to electricity. And since I'm using a different weapon now, I can talk about heft and poise, which are 2 things in this game. Every weapon has a certain amount of heft, which determines how far it will knock people back. And all enemies have a certain amount of poise. I don't think they call it poise, I think it's something else, but I can't remember what it's called. So the longsword, for instance, will often stagger basic enemies, which is why I'll probably be using it the most. Whereas this thing takes a few hits to stagger. These guys also explode now. I think I'm going to ditch the electricity sword and pick up the axe. Axe is a tier 1 weapon. There are 4 tiers in the game, 4 obviously being the best. Axe does not have a lot of heft, but it is fast. And I probably won't encounter that many spiders here, so it's not really worth keeping electricity. But generally the weapons you want to use the most are the weapons with heavy heft. Those are usually broadswords. Broadswords are probably the best weapon in the game. This will still kill spiders in one hit, so there you go. And it looks like we've already reached the 2nd level, which is record time, pretty much. I kind of want to... Spider. One thing about this game, you are not invincible when opening doors or chests. You can be hurt. So I kind of want to go back and explore and get more money, because I'd like to level up again, but it's not necessary. I am going to buy a potion of vigor here. Should always have one of them on hand. And a scroll of identification. I haven't mentioned this, but whenever you pick up a potion or a scroll, you don't know what they are, you have to identify them first. With that, let's head down to the next level. So I think here is probably where I'm going to cut the video. I'm going to try to go for as long as I can, but I think this is a pretty good showing of Necropolis so far. So I'll see you next time. Maybe. We'll see.